Today's episode features Scott Weiss, and this is part two. So if you have not seen part one, please check out last week's episode.
So they brought in a new secretary by the name of Bob McDonald. Bob McDonald's a really interesting figure in American politics because his previous job before joining the VA was he was the CEO of Procter and Gamble.
Mm.
And so he came in, he was like, wait, this is how you're running this? and so the first thing he did was stand up what we now know as the Veterans Experience Office. And he was like, at the very least, we need to create some sort of listening and learning channel so that the enterprise can better understand the unmet needs of veterans. And one of the first, it was a political appointee, came in to run the first sort of iteration of the office. And that person, the first hire they made was a chief design officer. And that the first thing the chief design officer did was, started a conversation about like, well, what is that journey that veterans take after they transition into civilian life? What are the first touch points they have with the VA? And they're like, oh, that's a great question. We've never documented it.
Oh, wow.
And so they put together this really comprehensive, it's publicly available. I highly recommend folks to Google it. It's the Veterans Journey Map. And it's literally, it's a graphic that charts that journey from sort of transition to their funeral, basically. And at the very least, it was this great visual representation of all of those moments that mattered along that journey so that the VA could at least use this artifact as a way to have a meaningful conversation about how to improve each of those touch points along that journey. And based on that, they were like, oh, well, maybe we should reorient this program office to support X, Y, and Z. And that was the start of this much bigger sort of odyssey that the Veterans Experience Office went on to build out sort of these robust data analytics capabilities, human-centered design capabilities. We got to support them on building out what is now called the Customer Experience Institute. So how do you scale, customer experience training across the enterprise of 400 plus thousand employees? And anyway, so it was a really great moment for all of government through this sort of VA story to better understand how to really start to build infrastructure to support, end user needs, the needs of the American public. So I'll pause there. I don't know if you have any reactions to that story.
Yeah, well, I would say, because you were saying that was right around, what was that? What time frame would that have been?
So 2016 was when the office was stood up, and then I joined in 2019 when they were really starting to hone in on their core capabilities.
And I would say within government space, within the DC consulting space, 2018 was the first time I'd ever heard of human-centered design. So right in that window, if you will, of the VA kicking off this initiative to when you got involved as well, was when I first heard about human-centered design as a concept. And I was like, why have we never talked about this before? I've been around a long time. We've done all kinds of different things, right? Usually like Six Sigma or, whatever quality initiative you want to throw at it, right? In terms of trying to create better product, but never about the person who uses the product. And have we ever met? I mean, large projects, government or non-government, are always known for not meeting the mark of the requirement, right? By the time they capture a requirement, by the time they built it, the requirement changed, or all those classic monolithic problems of a slow-moving large system design. I have a software engineering background, so I think system design. But the human-centered design concept for problem solving, when I first learned about it, and we did like a stand-up workshop in the middle of a conference, just a whiteboard, and whoever happened to be walking around, we said, hey, you're on our team. We set up a bunch of teams, and we walked them through this design experience for a government person who expressed their challenge. and they
Yeah.
explained their challenge. And next thing you know, by the end of that, whatever, half hour, 45 minutes, that government individual had, 30 new ideas to go run down to try to figure out how to solve their problem. And the power of that in such a short period of time was amazing to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't, I mean, I'm an evangelist of this. I teach it myself. So I agree. The power beyond the process is inviting
Yeah.
people into the space and reminding them that like anyone and everyone is capable of of engaging in this process.
Yeah.
All it is at its core is talk to people using the information you get from those conversations to generate an insight and using that insight to develop a viable solution. That is really the headline of it. Obviously, there's a bit more complexity across those phases. You want to make sure that you are bringing users in throughout to make sure that it is, feasible and desirable and viable, and also, as part of the yang to this yin is you have to make sure that the organization that is designing and deploying this new service has the capabilities operationally to be
Mm,
able to do that. So a lot of the work that we do as consultants in this space is really deeply understanding the bureaucracy and how that is structured within a federal agency, and really going in and giving those cross-functional leaders and their teams permission to sort of collaborate across those channels, really understand agency priorities and how the human-centered design can lead to an outcome that is directly reflective of what that will make them all look good to Congress, right? So they publish these there every few years or so. So just making sure that it all connects and can be sort of adopted and sustained over time. That's the real tricky part.
yeah.
Um, and so on the heels of this VA project, my mind was blown. I'm like, design is everywhere now in government, and um, another fellow and I, who I was working with on the VEO project, we were brought in to support a team at OMB, specifically their performance team, um, to help them think about a framework that every high impact service provider agency could adopt as a way to help them sort of go on the similar journey the VA went on,
Mm,
right? So, how might they sort of organize themselves around a customer experience framework and journey, so that they would ensure that they were progressing along that model. And there's decades of conversation, so I don't want to you know claim that there weren't lots of really brilliant dynamic folks working on this since the 90s, frankly. um, but I think where the White House and a lot of federal agencies had a tough time activating this stuff was not just because of some of the bureaucratic hurdles in affecting change more seamlessly, but oftentimes customer experience was perceived as a nice to have, right? And the incentive structure hadn't really been there um, for many years to incentivize a lot of those frontline service delivery administrators to deliver better experiences. And so what we were able to do through this work was really quantify the value of and cost of delivering a poorly designed service to the American public
mm,
versus a well-designed service. And what we were able to actually quantify was that it costs taxpayers way more money to engage with a terribly designed product and service than it does a well-designed product and service. So we're able to sort of work on a sprint through USDA's WIC and SNAP programs, as a way, as a measurement of you know, opportunity, really, and that everyone was able to kind of coalesce around that realization. And so from there, we sort of huddled as this cross-functional team. There were, really awesome leaders as part of this broader council working to like figure out what the strategy would be. And on the other side of some sprints and some pilots and conversations, we were able to put together what is now known as the executive order on customer experience. That really is a sort of a mission statement for what government services could and should be, and how government needs to, reimagine itself to support those needs. Associated with that was the president's management agenda. And if you go through it, Jeremy, you'll see the human-centered design is written throughout it, which is really inspiring and exciting. And then there's, as part of, the sort of A11 Circular 280 guidance, the actual guidance written to support improved service design delivery, were all of the sort of, check boxes that high impact service provider agencies needed to adhere to. So yeah, I'll pause there. I'm curious. I saw your head nodding.
Yeah, no, well, I'm just in serious agreement, right? All of those things
Yeah.
you mentioned have been extremely impactful. I think a lot of people don't understand that we always think about government and the bureaucracy. Certainly there is bureaucracy.
Mhm.
I don't think people understand why sometimes. And
Yeah.
much of it does stem from the fact that political leadership changes on a fairly frequent basis, right? Even if you have
Yeah.
a president for 2 terms, it's only 8 years. And
Yeah.
then they're replaced. And even if it's the same party, there's a lot of turnover because people
Mhm.
leave even before the end of that time. They see the writing on the wall that person's not going to be around anymore. So they're like, I've done my term of public service. Maybe I'm moving on to something else. And they don't
Yeah.
realize then how risk averse sometimes we are, because there are political ramifications to failing a launch of something to the
Totally.
public, right? Like the
Yeah.
VA experienced, and it does reflect on the department heads, on the president, on the people who put them there. And so
Yeah.
government has a tendency to be risk averse, and we should be, don't get me wrong, we should be. But sometimes that risk aversion is at the cost of innovation, and everything you've been talking
Yeah.
about illustrates why that innovation is a necessary component to
Yeah.
offset the bureaucracy, so that we can deliver better citizen services. So, which you talk to anybody in government, that's what they want.
Yeah.
Sometimes we just don't know how, right? Because the cogs in the wheel don't turn very fast.
Yeah. I think it was an interesting it wasn't even a revelation. I think it was pretty obvious going into this work with the White House on customer experience, was that American citizens do not experience government services in a vacuum. It's
Mm-hmm.
usually a result of an experience they have in their lives,
Mm-hmm.
right? They, just experience a disaster, right? A natural disaster, and they no longer have a home, right? And when that happens, they're typically not just dealing with FEMA, right? They're dealing with multiple federal agencies. And what was exciting about these conversations, that were really sort of, front and center when I was a PIF, and still very much in play now, was that federal agencies themselves need to be talking to each other more regularly, and orient themselves more intentionally around life experiences,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we actually got to do a couple sprints highlighting very specific life experiences, and identified the key agencies that contributed to those experiences. So again, facing a disaster, experiencing disaster, it's FEMA, it's HUD, it's SBA,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so how do we sort of reorient federal government to collaborate on improved customer experiences, which is really cool. And now they've conducted 10 pilots across 10 different life experiences and have learned so much that is being used to iterate on, what was the executive order in PMA, and it's just to help everyone better understand how to organize more effectively around these issues. And, I mean, you look at, that they're a client of ours currently, like the Social Security Administration. You look at IRS. I mean, those agencies, they touch every American life in some way, shape, or form. The scale of that is mind-boggling. And so we need to get better, and we are incrementally at how meaning government, organizes itself around better meeting those needs, right? I think this word innovation gets thrown around so much. I know you asked me at the top of this to think about just kind of reflections, and I think we need to understand that innovation means different things to different agencies, right? And that it's there. Everyone's default is we need a sexy new technology, right? That Salesforce is going to change the way we understand ourselves, and that's actually not true. I think it's really about human beings that are responsible for using that technology, And honestly, Jeremy, this, it's just innovation could be how you meet with your team,
Yeah.
More, dynamically and collaboratively. And so I think there's a big takeaway I have is I think problematic to lead with a tech solution.
Oh, absolutely.
If you, do not understand the operating environment and the players involved and the context.
Yeah, absolutely. As somebody who works in government, I'm on my fifth federal agency. I have
Well,
seen delivery of solutions that haven't included that aspect, right?
mhm,
Traditional government is, I mean, and don't get me wrong, it's well-meaning people develop those systems to comply with a law that
totally.
Congress passed, right? To service citizens in a certain way.
Yeah,
I just think even as a whole, technology is it changes so quickly that we've learned better, not just in the government space, but in the
yeah,
private sector about these things. Because I mean, like your experience in design didn't start in government; it started in the private sector. Private sector realized this was a necessity to doing business and making better customers, right? Having
yeah,
and servicing customers. So government is just been a little slower, and always is a little slower to adopt the things that are coming out of industry. And now we finally
yeah,
caught the fire.
yeah. 100%. And I in the, I mean, it's been 5 years is like 15 minutes by federal government standards, but the more entrenched I am in it, the more positive things I'm seeing. Um, as I was approaching the end of my fellowship, another fellow and I really talked about how we might continue to do that type of work without necessarily staying on as full-time federal employees. Not because we had anything against federal service. We just wanted to work on a lot of different things, and not just necessarily be tied to one federal agency. I'm pretty cause agnostic. I want to solve a lot of shit out in the world, and I want to like spread this sort of human-centered design philosophy and behaviors around, systemic challenges. Um, so we talked a lot about how might we, leverage everything we learn as fellows, all of the relationships we had cultivated, both, from the federal leadership side, but also all the vendors we met
Yeah.
along the way. Because you know this, Jeremy, right? Like every PIF project we worked on, Deloitte was nearby. Like Accenture was nearby.
Yeah.
Smaller firms were nearby, and they're all well intended. Everyone's well intended, but we wondered like, how can we help as PIFs? The job really is to bridge industry expertise with federal challenges and bring those parties together more effectively. And so we were really excited about continuing to do that as government contractors, right? So we talked to a lot of folks on both sides of the fence to better understand, our journey, what that journey would look and feel like, and yeah, are now 2.5 years in and are continuing to be able to support in a very similar way, which is exciting. And and yeah, are learning more and more each day. And I think the big opportunity that we found both when we were PIFs, but also now is how might we bring public and private together more, creatively,
Mm.
and more, with more um, dynamism, so that we're actively considering these end users and organizing around contracts more effectively. So that's where we've found some real good opportunities.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Now, typically at this point, I ask my guests, looking back, what's something you feel like you would change? But I think almost our entire conversation has been a bit about that. But I'll ask it anyway in case there's something else that
Yeah.
comes to mind. Looking back at your
Mm,
career and the various stages you are, multiple careers you've had at this
mm,
point, right? Restarting.
yeah.
What's something that you've witnessed that you wish we didn't do the way we do? And if you could start a conversation on that change, right? We can't wave a magic wand and fix large issues,
Yeah.
but maybe start considering what might we do to change the way something's being
Yeah.
done. What's something you've witnessed you wish we did different?
Yeah. I'll say a few things. One on my more micro level, reflecting on my life, that like professional reinvention is possible.
Yeah.
And to everyone who is, you know, um, navigating complicated questions about their career, it's okay to take a step back and explore different pathways. So I will just say that from a personal level. One thing, I think other people can potentially change in themselves on a micro level. More macro level, I think I alluded to this earlier. Um, the challenges that we are confronting in modern day America and globally are very complicated. And in order to solve those complex challenges, we can't continue to approach those challenges in the way that we have been
Hmm.
for decades. I think it is really important that we continue to look at ways to bring stakeholders across sectors together, which also includes academia, nonprofit, industry,
Yeah.
governments, federal, state, local, to organize around some of these challenges locally or globally, more creatively and with more innovation and ingenuity. I still think like the current, and I understand the irony here in this, but like the current procurement system in solving it's I understand it's like this ocean of contract vehicles, and it has to, it's very complicated, and I get it. But I think now is the time to bring maybe some more imagination to how we think about constructing contracts that are meant to deliver positive outcomes, right? And maybe we can write contract language that are more tied to outcomes than they are requirements, is something I wonder we can think about more intentionally. Another thing I think about a lot, because I mentioned this earlier, I grew up with privilege. I had a great education, and I knew nothing about how federal government worked or what a public service career could even mean. No one teaches college kids about there's like a political science
Right.
path. There will always be ideological brilliant folks who want to run for office or support a leader who is running for office, and that is meaningful. There is no roadmap that I've come across that helps our society, middle school, high school, college, better understand what a public service career not just could look and feel like, but all the innovative roles that exist within this society, that you and I are a part of. Like I went to the Sammys a couple years back, which is the Oscars for public servants, and I you hear all these amazing stories. Like one for example, there were these three women at the State Department that single-handedly built the infrastructure to help Afghani families resettle in the United States,
Oh, wow.
right? And it's like the average citizen will never hear about this. So I wonder how might we reimagine how government amplifies these stories of change and impact so that at the very least there's more awareness that this is happening. There's massive mistrust in democratic institutions right now.
Hmm.
And I think um, government needs to get better at telling these stories for many reasons. And I think these stories should be told at the middle school level, at the high school level, and at the college level. So I don't have to in my late 30s, go into federal service and only begin to hear about all of this work that's been happening. Um, so I will say that is one thing I would like to see more change in. And then, on the other side of the awareness thing is how do we make it easier to bring those people who are interested in
Hmm.
government so they don't have to, by the way, every year, yes, the PIF program is great, but they only bring in 20 people, a cycle. So it's a small drop in a very large ocean. And what I tell people who are interested in public service, that there are many ways to think about accessing this career. Will federal salaries or state salaries ever meet the what the average tech salary? Probably not. But there are if they only knew the sort of the risks, rewards,
Yeah.
and benefits to public service work and all of the exciting projects associated with it, I think they'd be more inclined to do it. So there's awareness, the interest, and then how do we make the hiring process
Uh,
slightly like the fact that so there's like the PIF experience, which is like a white glove service, by the way. It still took it was very tedious nonetheless, and I just wonder if there are ways we can modernize that and make that more efficient so that um, we don't lose talent to the really burdensome process and lengthy timeline associated with government hiring.
mhm.
So I would change that. Again, this is a magic wand
Right,
conversation.
right. It's not going to happen today or tomorrow, but it's a great idea. Yes, great idea to consider. So what's coming up for you in the near future, Scott?
So yeah, I think I alluded to the fact that we have, as part of Catalyst business, we have our advisory line, so our consulting line. A lot of cool projects there where we're actually, as part of the work we did with White House, we're now helping federal agencies build CX capabilities to not only support the executive order and the president's management agenda and all of the associated metrics. This is broadened, and now we're actually doing that for both Fed Civ, but also DoD.
Hmm.
So we're helping DoD think about customer experience as a national security benefit, because the more aware they are of their sort of ecosystem of customers and their needs, the more proactive they can be. And there's like a real case to be made about readiness and CX, the role CX can play in readiness. We're currently working with the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, subbing to Deloitte, and we're helping them really sort of reorganize themselves to be more customer centric, so that they could protect our critical infrastructure from being, you know, increasingly more and more vulnerable,
Yeah.
right?
Wow.
So that is all. CX is a mechanism for national security, and honestly, and this is very pie in the sky, and I don't know if this is just a theory, but I feel like the more we can do to improve the services that we design and deliver to the American public, Social Security benefits, unemployment insurance, the DMV, TSA, the more trust we'll be able to rebuild with with American citizens, and rebuild our faith in democratic institutions. I don't think it's just related to the news media narrative. I think there's like the actual day-to-day experience we have with government services influences our relationship with government at large as well. Um, so I will say that. So there's like the advisory side. We recently launched an education business. So teaching human-centered design and customer experience to federal communities, to vendor partners, which we love, and tying it to a specific challenge those communities are trying to solve so it feels more tangible and real. And then the other sort of version of that is we're partnering with nonprofits and building human-centered design courses around challenges that they are trying to solve for their communities.
Oh.
And then through that portal, we invite, federal employees, industry folks, university professors, all sorts of this like petri dish to like come into this space, learn design, and do it in service of solving this challenge for the nonprofit. The course we just launched recently, we've just done 2 of them, is with the National Military Family Association. And the challenge that we built the course around was around solving military spouse unemployment. And so out of 2 workshops were 10 viable concept pitches, and 2 of which were already invested in, one of which is already launched, which is amazing. So we're constantly trying to think of creative ways to like bring private and public together in an environment that is collaborative and leads to meaningful outcomes for underserved communities.
Well, Scott, that work is extremely valuable. I appreciate greatly what you're doing to help government
Thank you.
consider better ways of servicing our citizens, which is the ultimate goal, right, of our government. And so I just want to thank you for that. And I look forward to seeing what happens in that space as both a government employee and a citizen who uses services. And a veteran who uses services. So I greatly appreciate the work that's happening there and can't wait to hear as you continue on the journey how it turns out. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and sharing your journey, sharing your story.
Thank you, Jeremy, for inviting me. It was a real treat. And I always love talking about these topics. So appreciate the time.